You need to unmute Yamil.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. This is the 13th annual Spellman Museum Postal History Symposium. I can't believe that it's been 13 consecutive years. We have to thank for this Larry Haber and the Collectors Club of New York, who have generously supported this by sponsoring these presentations. I'm going to introduce to you our Executive Director, Brian Howard.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Emil, and welcome everybody to the 13th Annual Spellman Museum Symposium. The Spellman Museum is one of two postal history museums in the United States, the only other one being the National Postal Museum in Washington, D.C. Since the early 1960s, the Spellman Museum has functioned to serve not only the philatelic community, but to the larger community in general to inspire people as to the hobby of philately, and also to highlight all of the topics, the pioneers, the events, the spaces, and other movements and other items all captured in the guise of the postage stamp. Postal history is rich and deep and runs far before the creation of the penny black in 1840. And I'm very pleased to see tonight's presenters going deep on something which is near and dear to the Spellman Museum's heart. Of course, we are in the cradle of the American Revolution, just outside of Boston, right near Lexington and Concord. And the postal history reflected in the topics tonight and in the American Revolution is something that I've been very much looking forward to seeing. So I'm pleased again to welcome Tim and Roger for their presentations, and to thank Larry and his colleagues at the Collectors Club of New York to make tonight possible, and Yamil as well for not only continuing to organize this, but to perpetuate it well into its second decade. Thank you all again for your attendance, and enjoy the program.
Thank you, Brian. Tonight we're very fortunate to have two very prominent postal historians and collectors. The first speaker is Roger Brody. Roger is one of the most distinguished American philatelists, one of the few signatories of the Roll of Distinguished Philatelists. He has been very active, writing, leading important philatelic organizations, and exhibiting. And without any further delay, I'll introduce Roger Brody to you. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Emil. Appreciate the kind words. Larry, can you, is my screen up?
Not yet. You have to hit the share button.
Hold on a second. How are we doing?
We're going to be there in 2 seconds. There we go. We're good.
Great. Bear with you 1 sec. "200 years after the Declaration of Independence, Adolph Coppell published a book about the British Stamp Act of 1765 titled The Stamps That Caused the American Revolution. A pamphlet related to the Stamp Act titled Instructions for the Distributors was recently discovered in Philadelphia at the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. The 16-page pamphlet was the property of John Hughes, a prominent colonial administrator and Pennsylvania politician. Ironically, the pamphlet not only led to the downfall of Hughes, it also played a role in bringing the American colonies together in defiance of British taxation and the birth of a nation. Our story begins in 1763 with the signing of the Treaty of Paris, formally ending the 7 Years' War between Great Britain and her allies against France and her allies. In the American colonies, the 7 Years' War is known as the French and Indian War. Though the 7 Years' War formally ended with the 1763 Treaty of Paris, the conflict in North America actually ended, for the most part, 3 years earlier, as England had driven the French from North America, obtained Florida from Spain, and controlled all the territory east of the Mississippi. In 1763, George Grenville assumed the position of First Lord of the Treasury and led the effort to raise revenue from the American colonies. Because of the 7 Years' War, British national debt nearly doubled to 130 million pounds, and post-war expenses were expected to remain high since England decided to keep 10,000 British regulars in the American colonies. Grenville convinced Parliament to pass the Stamp Act of 1765, duties in the American colonies, imposing the first tax based entirely on activities within their North American and island colonies. It required that almanacs, pamphlets, and newspapers carry a printed tax stamp, and legal and commercial documents carry an embossed revenue stamp. The stamps had the words America in the design to distinguish them from British revenues. Bear with me one second. The 23 stamp distributors, generally respectable members of their colonial districts, were selected to dispense the stamp paper for a handsome 7.5% of the tax. Stamp paper was consigned to Quebec, Montreal in Canada, and 8 Atlantic and West Indies districts, East and West Florida, and all 12 of the American colonies, plus the 3 lower counties of Newcastle, Kent, and Sussex, administered by Pennsylvania, that became the Delaware state in 1776. Parliament passed the Stamp Act on March 22, 1765, to take effect on November 1st, while some like Patrick Henry in Virginia and John Adams in Massachusetts presented reasoned arguments for the repeal of the act. A more radical group of Boston citizens encouraged defiance. Their influence as an organized group extended throughout the colonies under the sobriquet Sons of Liberty, demanding the repeal of the act and advocating vocal and physical resistance. To them, the act violated British common law that British subjects should not be taxed by Parliament without consent. The colonists, of course, elected no members to Parliament. Thus, the stamp distributors experienced threats and actual property destruction and were forced to resign and take oaths not to carry their duties. John Hughes played a major role in Pennsylvania during the 18th century. Hughes held the position of Speaker of the Pennsylvania Colonial Assembly and was a close ally of Benjamin Franklin and Joseph Galloway, both leading figures in the colony. In 1765, when Parliament passed the Stamp Act, Hughes, on the recommendation of Benjamin Franklin, was appointed as the official stamp distributor for Pennsylvania and the Delaware colonies. The stamp paper for Hughes arrived in Philadelphia on October 5th aboard the Royal Charlotte. The bill of lading noted 3 cases and 7 packages of stamps for Hughes, 2 cases and 1 pack for Zachariah Hood of Maryland, and 1 case and 2 packs or packages for William Cox of New Jersey. In the left margin of the bill is an embossed British fourpence stamp paying the British Bill of Lading documentary tax, and 3 sets of initials and shipment numbers, identifying the markings on the cases and packs. This was the first of 3 shipments of stamps dispatched to use. Of Pennsylvania. The Hughes Archives also contains a previously unreported pamphlet titled Instructions for the Distributors. The 16-page saddle-stitched pamphlet bears John Hughes Esquire's signature on the outside enclosure. The cover page and title page, instructions to be observed by each distributor of stamped parchment and paper, etc., and the collector of His Majesty's duties arising therefrom are illustrated. The pamphlet was printed by J.N.R. Tonson, a well-known publisher and bookseller in London. Though slightly water-stained, all the pages are intact and quite readable. The following pages contain 13 Roman numeral paragraphs of instructions for the distributors. These instructions covered the use, care, and security of the stamp paper, and the keeping of proper accounts, the hiring of sub-distributors, handling of money, and reporting to the stamp office. Of particular interest is instruction 3, describing the use of sub or under distributors, a feature of the Stamp Act hardly touched upon in the literature. The last of these instructions cover the accounting procedures printed on the 2 fold-out pages in the pamphlet. They are sample accounting and reporting formats to be used by the stamp distributors. The first page covered the expenses incurred by the distributors, including postage and freight from England, and to sub-distributors, requiring an accounting of the value of stamped parchment and paper remaining unsold in the possession of both distributor and other distributors at year end. The second large fold-out covered making the distributors' annual accounts as of the 1st of November of each year, including accounting of receipts of value and duties and the disbursements to the stamp office. The reaction to the distribution of stamp paper was explosive. Upon learning of the passage of the Stamp Act, a radical group in Boston, under the sobriquet Sons of Liberty, encouraged defiance. Their influence as an organized group extended throughout the colonies, demanding the repeal of the act and advocating vocal and physical resistance. Stamp distributors experienced threats and actual property destruction and were forced to resign and take their oaths not to carry out their duties. Andrew Oliver, brother-in-law of Lieutenant Governor and Chief Justice Thomas Hutchinson, was appointed distributor for Massachusetts. On August 14th, Oliver was hanged in effigy from the Boston Liberty Tree. That night, Oliver's house and offices were ransacked by an angry crowd. They demolished the interior of his house, drank up the contents of his wine cellar, and turned his carriage, furniture, and wainscoting and privy into matchwood. On August 17, Oliver was compelled to publicly resign his commission. Lieutenant Governor Thomas Hutchinson, who had been chased through the streets on the night of the 14th, suffered a worse fate. On the evening of August 26, the mob attacked Hutchinson's handsome Georgian house. By morning, nothing remained but the bare walls and floors. Not content with tearing off all the wainscoting and hangings and splitting the doors into pieces, they beat down the partition walls and cut down the cupola. Only the approaching daylight prevented the total demolition of the building. Word of the action upon Oliver quickly arrived in other colonies. The Sons of Liberties were achieving notoriety, stuffing effigies, erecting mock gallows, and raising mobs to the distributors to keep them in a cooperative frame of mind. In Rhode Island, the mob carried off as many of distributor August Johnson's household possessions as they could lay their hands on. The next morning, Johnson publicly resigned, an act that saved his house, got much of his property returned, and allowed him to resume his place in the community. In New York, James McEvers renounced his appointment on August 22nd to save his warehouse. And in New Jersey, William Cox surrendered his commission before a single effigy had swung, merely because he had heard news from New England. George Meserve of New Hampshire announced his resignation at Boston on September 10th, even before he stepped off the ship that had brought him from England. Colonel George Mercer, returned to Virginia on October 31 aboard the ship that carried the stamps for Virginia, Maryland, and North Carolina. Finding a similar angry reception, he made a quick obeisance. South Carolina's distributor Caleb Lloyd arrived on October 26, discovered that a mob of 2,000 men had been narrowly dissuaded from leveling his house a week earlier, and he resigned as well. North Carolina distributor William Hutchinson, a physician who had not sought the office, renounced his commission as soon as it arrived before a mob of several hundred men. Others less willing to defer to the mobs found displays of personal courage repaid with economic or political ruin. Maryland's distributor, the merchant Zachariah Hood, withstood an effigy hanging and then saw a mob demolish his warehouse. A broken man, he went to England in 1771 to seek compensation from the crown, and he never returned. Connecticut's distributor, Jared Ingersoll, was held hostage by the Sons of Liberty at Wethersfield until he agreed to resign. Ingersoll's law practice declined so badly, he had to call on London friends to secure him a vice admiralty judgeship in Philadelphia. The price of retaining his livelihood was exile from his home colony. Accounts of riots in New England reached Philadelphia in early September. John Hughes soon came under pressure to resign. On September 16th, all that kept a mob from destroying his house and Benjamin Franklin's were the patrols of armed men that Joseph Galloway sent into the streets. Though Hughes and his property remained safe, he endured anonymous threats for weeks. Hughes managed to hold out for 2 more days before finally promising not to execute the act. His quasi-resignation kept the mob from pulling down his house, though tensions lessened, his career in politics were finished. That October, Hughes did not run for re-election in the Colonial Assembly. Isolated and bitter, he retired to a farm outside Philadelphia. In 1769, he accepted a Crown appointment as Collector of Customs of Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and left Pennsylvania for good. The following year, he took a similar position arranged by Benjamin Franklin in Charlestown, South Carolina, where he died on February 1st, 1772. The only American colony of Georgia protected by British regulars rather than colonial militia used stamp paper, returning a grand total of 45 pounds sterling back to England. Of the total of 173,000 pounds of stamp paper sent to the 23 distributors, only 3,292 pounds was raised from Quebec, Montreal, West Florida, and the British West Indies. 105,000 pounds worth of paper was returned, and 37% or 64,000 pounds of stamped paper went missing or destroyed. Colonial distributors refusing their commissions and colonists boycotting imports from British merchants, the Stamp Act was doomed. Within 4 months of implementation, Parliament repealed the Stamp Act on March 11, 1766. I'm having trouble moving my, hold on. Though a decade would pass before the American colonies would declare their independence, the events surrounding the act and the actions described in this pamphlet became the impetus for the rallying cry of Massachusetts Assemblyman James Otis: "Taxation without representation is tyranny," the watchwords of the American Revolution and the birth of the United States. As for John Yu's pamphlet, an inquiry to the British Museum and the British Library failed to uncover an additional copy of the instructions for distributors among their collections. With 23 distributors appointed for North America, Bermuda, and the British West Indies, it's possible another copy of the pamphlet will surface. But for now, John Yu's copy is the only one that's known to survive. Thank you. I hope you enjoy the presentation.
Ed.
Thank you very much,
Almost.
Roger. That was very informative and fascinating information. I'm going to save the questions until after Tim's presentation. Our next distinguished speaker is Dr. Tim O'Connor, who is a well-known student, researcher, author, and exhibitor of colonial postal history of the 13 colonies. Tim?
Thank you, Yamil. Roger, I must say congratulations on the thrill of discovery of archival material. It's wonderful to have this stuff still pop up from time to time. All right. Larry, hit the power. There we go. Share, green button.
Yep.
Share, blue button.
Got it.
Yay. Well, folks, we're going to talk about the postal history of the War for Independence, and we're gonna pass on routes and rates and stuff like that. We're going to talk about the connection of this postal history to the actual history of the Revolution. Okay, trying to go from right to left. So Roger has touched on this, that the consequences of the French and Indian Wars are terribly important in creating an atmosphere where revolution is the only path forward. For me, the first act that lights the fires of revolution is the Royal Proclamation of 1763, which the Crown passed, designating land beyond the Appalachian Mountains to be future Indian territory forever given to them, thus disappointing American soldiers from the French and Indian Wars who were planning on moving across the Appalachian Mountains, and land speculators. The Stamp Act of 1765 has been reviewed by Roger, I think that Hugh Finley, Ben Franklin, and London merchants played a big role in getting that Stamp Act repealed. In 1768, Boston was occupied to enforce the Townshend Acts, put a large number of troops on a small isthmus and plot of land. Tensions rose, and the Boston Massacre of 1770 created much dissent. Sam Adams started the first committee of correspondence in November of 1772 to publicize via written letters the tragedies and progress of British control in Boston. The Boston Tea Party of December 1773 was a keynote item in the Patriots' fervor for punishing the British merchants and the Crown, denying them tax money. The Port Act, the arrival of General Gage with many more troops, and the Massachusetts Government Act in 1774, eliminating the Massachusetts Provisional Congress and any judges, putting all of the judges under the pay of the Crown, and creating mandamus counselors to enforce the laws of Great Britain in Massachusetts. The last item that I've highlighted here is the powder alarm of September 1774. So Sturbridge, Massachusetts, in Worcester County, on 27 August 1774, this is a letter from Job Hamant to his brother Asa Hamant, captain of the Medfield militia, with care and speed. So at the very least, this is a letter between militias, could be just a letter between brothers, but the with care and speed seems to indicate something more important than that. I don't have any indication that this is a true Committee of Correspondence letter. The contents show that the militia was called to alarm, and Abijah Willard, grandson of General Willard, who was one of the leaders of the Puritan forces in 1665 that captured or killed King Philip, was brought to confession and recanted his mandamus counselor status. January 5, 1775. This is a letter from the Friends of Liberty castigating James Rivington, publisher of a loyalist newspaper in New York, vitriolic assaults on rebel ideals. His print shop was burned. The heavy equipment was melted down for lead, confiscated by the Friends of Liberty to turn into bullets. He returned to London. He went back to London, returning in 1777, opening a coffee house and resuming publication of his newspaper. Once again, a Loyalist Gazette. Between the Loyalist Gazette and the coffee house, he accrued a large number of British patrons. Peggy Shippen was there, Benedict Arnold was there, Major John Andre is there, and it's now known that James Rivington was in fact the fifth member of the Culper spy group, Washington's famous Secret Six, that was supplying him with inside information about the comings and goings of the Crown agents and soldiers in New York. turns out that Rivington's a little bit of a hero, even though he died penniless and actually spent some time in a debtor prison. In March 1775, conditions are getting more difficult for the crown in New England. This is a letter from Richard Nichols Colden to the deputy postmaster of Newport. Read New York, second style cancellation, free because he's secretary of the post office. And he's looking for a list of postmasters who might be considered loyal to the crown. Let's see, where's the, there it is. The Port Act of 1774 closed the port of Boston to any commercial traffic whatsoever. As a result of that, ships landed mostly in towns north of Boston, Salem, Gloucester, Newburyport. This one ship, the St. Paul, Captain Gordon, ended up in Marblehead, nice Marblehead cancellation, and represents another blow to the city of Boston, losing income from processing cargoes. Everything came to a head in April of 1775. The British sent out a column of troops to secure powder and cannon in the Lexington and Concord area. Battle was fought, and the British scurried back to Boston. And that powder alarm of 1774 was a dress rehearsal for what happened afterwards. The powder alarm of 1774 actually began with miscommunication, whereby some folks in Cambridge, patriots, heard that some residents of Boston were shot by General Gage's troops, and that Gage was going to send out troops looking for cannon and powder that had been stored in various repositories around Boston. The Patriot militia, which had been training diligently, albeit lacking enough powder to actually fire their arms from time to time. The same militia, like the folks in Sturbridge, the Hamant family in Medfield and elsewhere, all began to, as a single organism, begin to march on the roads heading towards Boston. 3,000, 4,000, the numbers of the farmers and businessmen plotting their way towards Boston, perhaps inaccurate, but the mob was at least 3,000 strong. When they were met by Dr. Warren and other members of the Boston committee, and actually correctly informed that Gage had not left the isthmus, not left Boston through the isthmus, and the mob was pacified, and they went back to their homes. But the precedent was set that with proper alarm bells, drums on the common, that a force could rapidly be assembled to march to Boston. That's the Minutemen of the British retreat back to Boston after the battles of Lexington and Concord. An enterprising soldier for the rebels was Ethan Allen. Where he got his military expertise, I don't know, but I suspect had something to do with the French and Indian War, maybe some experience there. In any event, he realized that Ticonderoga may not have heard about Lexington and Concord, and that it could be surrounded and blockaded, so to speak. This letter from Albany, May 6, 1775, is probably the last letter to go up the great northern route via Lake Champlain, Albany, Lake Champlain, onto St. John and Montreal. And one of the interesting parts of this letter is that the Albany post office rated the letter in 10 pence sterling. I don't think I've seen that rating ever again. Okay. So by July, much of the American colonies, all the American colonies are fully aboard the conflict. There are committees of correspondence, there are militia available, and Reverend Batwell was a truly loyalist Methodist missionary, Church of England missionary in Eastern Shore, Maryland, so successful and vitriolic towards the rebels that he was actually arrested in 1775 and sent to Yorktown outside of Philadelphia, where there was I don't know, I wouldn't call it a prisoner of war camp, but where they held loyalists who were giving the coalition a hard time. So parenthetically, for folks who like to think about the N of the rating, so this is no shillings, 8 pence, and that's, you know, I guess it's an N, but you could certainly see how it's a a straight line. The heaviest part of it is a straight line, and to the right is the 8 pence. Below that, because the letter gets forwarded, an additional 6 pence to go from Philadelphia to Yorktown. Batwell actually gets released. He gets rearrested in 1778, continuing to preach against the revolution. And eventually he gets sent to New York City in a prisoner exchange. The back of that letter has a nice cancel that's a second style crown hand stamped Talbot Courthouse, and second style Philadelphia marking where the A is as large as the PHIL. Those are all crown instruments. Off the coast of Eastport, Maine, it's still colony of Massachusetts, Machias, there's a privateer squadron which regularly intercepts the letters on the way to Nova Scotia. So this is a letter from the Barbados, July 5th, 1775, by way of Rhode Island. And then after he made land at Rhode Island and probably got more food and fresh water, on the way to James Monk at Halifax, Nova Scotia, the ship was taken and the mail was down below, opened by order of Committee of Safety for Machias. This is the Reverend James Lyon, chairman of the committee. So the Patriots are interfering with Crown mail, and the privateers are doing their job. This is a little bit early chronologically, but I put it here to honor Ben Franklin, who on July 26th was asked to be Postmaster General of the Continental Congress. And you can see he has the Be Free Franklin free marking up in the upper right-hand corner. The Be Free Franklin marking is not known before the repeal of the Stamp Act, the 1765, and with 3 exceptions, it's how he franked all the mail after the repeal of the Stamp Act. I interpret this to be a political, please feel free, America, we've done a good thing. Let's keep fighting, whatever. There's the Philadelphia with the high A, the smaller A, the high A, August 27th. That Phil A is a Continental Congress marking. The Massachusetts Provisional Congress created a Massachusetts Provisional Post connecting Portsmouth, New Hampshire with Cambridge on the way to New York, which was under Ebenezer Hazard, becoming a Continental Congress first post office. The turquoise ink is interesting, persistent. CAMB is Cambridge. The 1 and 8 is a little bit of an unusual rate, but the Massachusetts Provisional Post had unusual rates. Calvin Hahn thought this was the first day cover of the American Continental Congress Post, and subsequently one from August 7th is out there in the world. Boston is occupied, remember, and this bit of mail from Boston back to England is from Colonel Cleveland. There's a large number of his letters, correspondence, and many of the letters bear no sign of transatlantic post. They end up going to Portsmouth, where all the military vessels put in and are privately carried to London. And it's 4 pence. That squiggle is a 4 pence to Somersetshire, Skilgate near Dulverton. He's writing home December 14th, 1775, and lamenting that the rebels have just made themselves master of St. John's, which is north of Lake Champlain. And the reason is that there's an American army on the way to Quebec. And they've landed, and they've successfully taken Montreal in 1776, January 15th. And Edward Measam, M-E-A-S-A-M, is Congressional Postmaster of Montreal. And there are at least 3 letters in the New York Historical Society that were part of an article I put together for discussion of the Montreal Congressional Post Office, and they're addressed to Eliza's father. You all know who Eliza was, right? Well, that's one of the 3 Schuyler sisters. So Major General Philip Schuyler. The army headed towards Quebec is not successful. They started too late. They ran into Canadian winter, smallpox, etc., and they had to retreat. This is a letter, is a rare letter from Vermont, the disputed territory of Vermont, February 5th, 1776. And the author is illiterate, and Colonel Seth Warner, Ethan Allen's #2, is writing the letter for him, the head of the Green Mountain Boys. And Ethan Allen is assembling another force for invasion of Canada. Goes to East Guilford, Connecticut with care. There are the many residents of East Guilford which relocated to Vermont up and down the Connecticut River. Did you know that the most people who died in the French and Indian War were from Connecticut, the state with the largest death toll from the French and Indian Wars? They gave a lot. Okay, so May 3rd, 1776, colony of Massachusetts, the council chamber. A vessel on the way into Boston has spotted a fleet of transports and warships headed north of Boston, probably to Quebec. Turns out that these vessels contain a wide array of soldiers, but Gentleman John Burgoyne, commander of Army of the North for Great Britain. And so this is a warrant to pay John Park £12 to be accountable for the same. He's writing express to Philadelphia to get word that as fast as possible. The Post is the communication venue of the time, to get information as fast as possible to the Continental Congress in Wharton. And this in Philadelphia. This document is signed by all the high-powered people of Massachusetts who are not bearing arms at this point in time. Cushing, Winthrop, Greenleaf, James Otis, Bowdoin, a lot of biggies, and an unusual document. Well, remember Ticonderoga, where Ethan Allen surrounded back in 75, earlier in 75. Turns out that a overweight 6'3", 6'4", bookish gentleman by the name of Henry Knox, who had been studying the physics of cannonading, went to Ticonderoga and took the cannonballs, powder, and cannons from Fort Ticonderoga, and in the middle of winter got them down to the area around Boston. So this is the Barnstable Committee of Correspondence reporting to Hancock that we have taken Dorchester Heights. That's a little tiny peninsula overlooking the entry to Boston, but it's high enough that it provides a perch from which they can fire cannon towards Boston. It may not have been entirely successful, but the threat was significant, and the British had tried to wiggle their way out, but a storm upset them, and they had to eventually flee the city of Boston on March 17th, I think, 1776. And this is one of the two yellow letters, yellow markings from Boston. Mark Schwartz is earlier than this. The letters addressed to Jabez Huntington from Thomas Cushing. They're both involved in provisioning the army. This nice little bit of postal history here. Came to hand May 24th per post. postage, 1 shilling 5 pence. That's probably a Massachusetts tenor type of marking. The Ebenezer Hazard New York post office has been up and running. The usual hand stamp from there is a different font than this one. This one has a little bit more of a stylish font rather than the blocky font. Again, letter to Jabez Huntington, this time from John Trumbull. And again, they're involved with the quartermastering clothing and food for the soldiers. This is 11 days before Ebenezer Hazard. This letter is 11 days before Ebenezer Hazard is ordered by the Committee of Safety to evacuate New York. The large force of British on Staten Island, and the tea leaves read trouble. So the first attempt to take Quebec failed, and the troops retreated south. And Colonel Anthony Wayne is in charge of managing that retreat, and is turns out to be Washington's favorite for a lot of different reasons. He did a good job of getting as many people as possible out of Canada, down Lake Champlain. And here he is, he's at Ticonderoga at this point in time. And a letter is sent to him favored by the Reverend Mr. Jones. Well, Mr. Jones is a chaplain. And in the papers of Benjamin Franklin, he's mentioned a couple of times in connection with Anthony Wayne, as the chaplain is smuggling letters in his cassock across the lines. And I'm a Catholic, I'm a missionary, I'm a chaplain, you don't need to search me. So he's been successful at getting information intelligence across the lines. So the gentleman, John Burgoyne, is driving south. The Northern campaign's entire rationale is to try and link up with Howe in New York City and sever the New England colonies from Philadelphia and the rest of the American colonies. The British believe that doing so will hamstring the revolution. So Burgoyne is driving south. This letter from October 20th, 1776. Crown Point is sort of, it's a little bit north, I think, of Ticonderoga on the west side of the Hudson River. And Burgoyne has been very, very effective. He stops maybe a little bit early. He maybe had another couple of weeks. Who knows how far he could have gotten. And Howe is doing nothing in New York City. There's no hint of him yet wanting to, oh, maybe I better join up with Burgoyne and maybe we can finish this thing off. So anyway, the text of the letter, Captain White, W-I-G-H-T, notes in the text of the letter that all letters go with Burgoyne. Burgoyne, the transports land in Portsmouth. This letter is carried privately to London, arriving 14 December 1776, and the letter is sent to Edinburgh, so it's 6 pence to go from London to North Britain. A second letter from this northern campaign. This one's at Fort Miller near Ticonderoga, August 27th, 1777. And it's got a little more postal history in that the letter is carried back to Quebec. And down on the bottom left, there's a Quebec double circle with a solid triangle. and the letter lands in Portsmouth, and it's actually charged postage, which is like, come on, you know, these are your soldiers. Anyway, 3 pence from Portsmouth is not really recognized as a known marking, according to my friends in Great Britain. And because it's 6 pence to North Britain, the total is in all 9. Northern Campaign letter discusses recent disastrous Battle of Bennington, foraging a party of 500 Brunswickers, Rangers, and volunteers, surrounded by rebels, killed, the greater part lost all their horses, 4 cannons. This is the last letter of Captain White, who's killed at Bemis Heights. Burgoyne surrenders October 17th at Saratoga, which ends the northern plan of the war councils in Great Britain. Great Britain will now concentrate on the middle and southern colonies. At this point in time, Washington's army is in northern New Jersey. This letter is from Middlebrook, addressed to Fredericksburg, 25 miles from West Point, not Virginia. It's to a Colonel George Baylor, and the Free Frank of George Washington appears lower left. Colonel Baylor leads a company of light dragoons, mobile cavalry, and he's surprised on September 29th while foraging near Tappan, and the British general Charles No Flint Gray, because he doesn't waste his flint, what he does is he bayonets all the American soldiers, and it's a setback. And anyway, later, about 6 months later, after the victories in central New Jersey, a couple of battles around Princeton and Germantown, New Jersey saw a lot of battles, back and forth, back and forth. In any event, France had seen enough to feel that the Americans had a chance, and they entered the war on February 6th, 1778. June 21, 1779, Spain joins, and you can feel the weight of the war changing a bit. This is a letter from Falmouth, England, addressed to the occupied city of Philadelphia. Philadelphia is occupied September 26, 1777 to June 78. And this heavy letter, 1 ounce, 4 shillings per the packet, contains newspapers. Now, a newspaper at this point in time is just 1 sheet of paper, usually, sometimes 4, but I'm sure there are 1 sheet of paper from London being sent to a merchant in Philadelphia, and they're all about the rumor of a treaty of defense signed between France and America, and what the impact will be on the outcome of the war. Washington is in West Point, September 7th. His army still needs lots of loving care from a lot of New England and other colonies. They need clothing, they need boots, they need food, they need a lot of stuff. Anyway, this is a letter to Jeremiah Powell, president of the state of Massachusetts, signed by Washington. They need powder, clothing from various privateer prizes. On the way to Montreal, the Americans captured a number of British soldiers and loyalists, Canadian loyalists, and they were sent south and they would be prisoners of war. According to Ben Franklin, POWs were Pandora's box of problems. These folks, I think, were in eastern Pennsylvania. The letter's from Lancaster, and it's one of the two POW letters that I'm aware of. It's privately carried to New York, and then goes on a packet ship, 1 shilling. You can see the N, 1 N, those of you who like N's. And in all, 1 N6 to get the letter up to northern Britain. The southern strategy is working. Savannah has been conquered and occupied. Charlestown, likewise. And this is a letter between two occupied cities. The Savannah marking is unique. There's no rate. There's no indication that the letter went by sea, although I think it sort of had to go by sea because the territory between Charleston and Savannah, roaming groups of militia and rebels. Anyway, it's an interesting marking and letter. In Philadelphia, Hancock's job, among other things, is to try and coordinate the French fleet and the French soldiers with Washington's movements. This is a letter to Commodore Destouches, who's in Newport, February, March 1781. Newport turns out to be a lovely harbor. The French are well received there. Lots of places to park their boat. And this is Hancock attempting to coordinate the French into taking decisive action. Occasionally, letters would be able to leave Charleston. This is a clergy reporting to the Society for the Propagation of the Gospel. The ship that carried this letter was caught once by privateers, was recaught by the British, was taken to New York, came back to Charleston, and then eventually was off on its way to London. And there's a different N. Actually, this was put on the letter in Charleston, and to me, it's clearly an N. And like I say, those whatever configuration it is, I call and. I think that's enough for me. There's marking on the back, occupied Charlestown. This is a good letter from Camp Goodson's, July 16th, 1781. The letter is addressed to Brigadier Jones. Public Service, Josiah Parker. There's more here. The back of the letter. Let the bearer have provisions and forage. All ferries must pass the bearer, Josiah Parker, Colonel. And on the side on the left, it says intelligence. And it's a great letter talking about Bannister Tarleton and his roving cavalry and the attempts by General Greene and others to sort of manage his depredations in Carolina. The race is on to cross the Dan. It's a river in Carolina, and eventually they get Tarleton to head down there. And Cornwallis is in Yorktown, and by now he knows he's surrounded. Washington, Lafayette, all of the American troops are surrounding him in Yorktown. Lord North, oh God, it's all over. this letter from 1 month prior to the Cornwallis capitulation is an attempt by Cornwallis to trade prisoners. Maybe there's still a little hope that the British fleet will arrive in time, but the Battle of the Capes has already happened, and the French are in control of the Chesapeake and the Bay. Hence Lord's North. Oh God, it's all over. And that's some postal history from the Revolutionary War. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you very much, Tim and Roger, for this wonderful history lesson and told in a very entertaining fashion. I have a handful of questions. Roger, with such a short period of use for the revenue stamps, how many examples are known, both embossed on legal documents and printed on newspapers? Is there a census or a rough idea?
I don't have the answer with regard to newspapers. Documents still exist or have survived from the Canadian cities of Montreal and Quebec, not in numerous quantities, but reasonable amount of material exists from there. There's one document known from the West Indies, no documents known from Bermuda, and there are two documents that survive from what is now the United States, one from West Florida and one from East Florida. Both of those territories were ceded to England as a result of the 1763 Treaty of Paris. England had captured Havana, obviously a very important port to Spain. So they were more than happy to give up Florida, which the British divided into two separate territories, East and West Florida. Other than that, no known documents are known from the 13 American colonies, and that's the majority of it.
Thanks. And are these documents mostly in private hands or in institutional collections?
Well, there's some in archives, government archives, but there are quite a number in private hands. There are several collectors of the embossed stamp revenue paper, but as I say, on occasion they do come up for sale. It's very rare for documents of the 1765 to show up, but they do show up on occasion.
Was this practice copied later on by the independent United States to raise revenue at some point, or was that ever tried?
It's actually the United States, in order to pay off their debts, implemented three different series of embossed revenue taxation, which was done on documentary notes. Primarily, there was taxation as well on newspapers, but there's quite a bit of material that does survive for all three of the federal acts implementing embossed revenues. Also, after Jefferson eliminated domestic taxation, when the War of 1812 occurred, there was a number of embossed taxation was done to tax distilleries and the retail sale of alcoholic beverages.
Thank you. I learned from your presentation that being a tax collector was a very hazardous occupation at that time, huh? Wow.
As you can see, the Sons of Liberty and related groups did a very efficient job in dissuading the distributors to implement the taxation.
Thank you. And for Tim, I have a couple of questions. One is you mentioned King Philip. Maybe some members of the audience don't know the Wampanoag Native American King Philip and the war that led to his capture and execution in the 1600s. Can you give us a very quick?
Well, from Deerfield in Massachusetts to eastern Connecticut, southeastern Massachusetts, and elsewhere, the Indian uprising in 1765, lasting for, I don't know, 18, 20 months, killed proportionately more people than any other war in America. It just happened that there weren't a lot of people in America, and a lot of them got killed, outside of, at the borders of what the Indians considered to be their town. The southeastern Massachusetts is pretty marshy, and King Philip and the Wampanoags, knew the bogs very well. They were able to hide, and they were ferocious. Yep. The Puritans eventually got them.
Thank you. And Larry, can we open the meeting to...
That's been done.
Okay. Are there any members of the audience who have any specific questions for our presenters or comments? Joe?
Stephen Tauber speaking here. Very early on in the illustration, I saw the British flag, but it is the one which includes Ireland in the flag. And I think at the time of the American Revolution, the Cross of St. Patrick was not yet in the Union flag.
You're right. It was adopted in 1801. So the flag that Roger showed is a little bit later, but yes, good eye.
Here in Lexington, we also see the red ensign with the pre-1801 at the hoist.
I thought you said a red ensign was only on a ship, right?
Well, it's called a jack if it's on a ship. It's called a flag if it's on land. But I think it was the same ensign on both instances. Thank you, Steve. Joe Mullen, if you can unmute yourself. Well, in the meantime, Louis, do you have any questions for the presenters?
I do, for Tim O'Connor. You showed a letter that, if I understood correctly, was written by Ethan Allen, and it was destined for Montreal. I didn't get who it was addressed to, and I think you said this in the context of announcing that Lexington and Concord had happened. And I wonder if you could clarify what that letter to Montreal was about and to whom it was addressed.
Yeah. So a merchant company, and I'd have to open up the letter, but say Bradley and Beal, a merchant in Albany who had previously been brought before the Committee of Safety, was writing to a merchant in Montreal asking if he could ship all of his warehoused material via New York up to Montreal to try and save the money that he had invested in his products, his merchandise. So it was a "can you please help me" kind of thing, because I can see that there's problems on the horizon for those of us who are British loyalists. And it was a desperate letter sent to Montreal. Yeah.
Thank you. I understand better now. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. At some point, you also mentioned you showed a letter to Eliza Schuyler's dad. You were making a reference to the musical Hamilton.
Yeah, that was Hamilton. That's for the youngsters in the crowd.
Yeah, not everybody may be familiar with it.
Yeah.
If you were in a coma for the last 10 years, maybe, but
Yeah. Okay.
Steve Walski, how are you?
Hi, Tim, fantastic presentation, both of you, Roger too. The material is actually to die for, so thank you for sharing that with us. I just wanted to point out one of the more obscure ones, which is historically very significant. The March 24th, 1778 letter from England to Philadelphia is actually very significant because that's when England learned of France's entrance into the war, literally on that day. So that is like faster news than the official channels were getting it back to Philadelphia. And they, as you know, evacuated, I think, 3 months later. So they moved fast once they realized that they were sort of vulnerable to the French fleet.
Yep.
Thank you, Stephen. Joe Mullen,
Yeah.
if
I'm all set, Yamil. Can you hear me now?
yes. How are you?
Good. I'm doing well, thanks. And Tim, my question and comment is on the committees on correspondence. You mentioned that Samuel Adams was the one who started the first committee of correspondence, and I think you said 1772, and that really was a big deal because he was starting them not only in Massachusetts, but really throughout the 13 colonies. So what happened when the British or the Patriots took on the British in Lexington and Concord in 1775, the news of that battle actually spread through the 13 colonies very, very rapidly. And in Philadelphia, the Second Continental Congress was meeting, and they immediately approved George Washington as the commander of the troops of all of the 13 colonies. So from April 1775, George Washington arrived in Boston by June, or rather July 3rd. And he stayed there until the colonials and the Patriots drove the British out on March 17, 1776. And the additional good news of that was it was St. Patrick's Day, which we now celebrate as a holiday forever after. So that's the comment. And Tim, were you right that Sam Adams was the first one to establish a committee of correspondence?
That's the information that I have.
Okay. Well, it was a big deal, and he did well.
Thank you, Joe and Tim. Are there any other questions, comments? Well, I'd like to remind you that a lot of these items will be available to be seen in the flesh at Boston 2026 from May 23rd to the 30th of next year at the Convention and Exhibition Center. One of the main exhibits in the Court of Honor will be an exhibit titled The Road to Independence, which will tell a very entertaining history of how we achieve independence with these historical items, focusing on the historical, not postal historical elements. So don't miss it. There's a rumor that a reincarnation of Dr. Benjamin Franklin will be there as well to give detailed information on the items. So there you go. So I encourage you to be there. It'll be a very memorable event and exhibition. If there are no further questions, I thank the presenters for such a wonderful lesson in history. I thank Larry Haber and the Collectors Club of New York for facilitating this. And I remind you that these and other events that the Spellman Museum puts together is to a great extent supported by our members. So I encourage you, if you're not already a member, to join. And thank you for participating. Have a good evening, everyone, and I hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, Yamil. See you later now.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Yamil. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you.
Great job, Tim.
Thanks, guys.
Good night.
Right.